Clerk will please read the bill.
House Bill 2700, Removal Fill Permitting Program Clemency.
Recognize Senator Lee Byer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, House Bill 2700 allows an applicant, which is usually a utility, to file a request for fill and removal permit with the Department of State Lands for a linear project, whether or not they own a piece of land. So what's a linear project? A linear project is a street, a rail line, a sewer or water line, an electrical transmission line, or a pipeline. Why is this important? Engineers tend to design linear projects in straight lines, moving straight from point A to point B. However, projects that are eventually approved rarely are permitted as they are initially submitted. Being able to file an application starts, let me repeat it, starts the public review by federal, state, and local agencies. More important, it starts a public notification process so that those potentially affected by a project can have an opportunity to provide information about conflicts or their personal concerns. Why shouldn't an applicant be required to own the land before they request a permit review? Simply, they may buy the wrong land, and as a result, ratepayers would end up paying for something they didn't need. Also, there would tend to be pressure on DSL to approve sightings that they otherwise wouldn't approve. So, could an applicant begin work before they actually own the land or had acquired an easement? The answer is no. Section 1, sub 2 of the bill clearly states that the applicant must own the land or have an easement before they can get a permit. Isn't it? Some have suggested this is a new private property taking. The answer is no. The right of eminent domain for public good has existed in Oregon and federal laws for many years. There's nothing in House Bill 2700 that does anything to change this. House Bill 2700 is not really a new law. In fact, the bill takes fill and removal process back to the way it was changed in where it had been for almost 50 years before it was changed in 2001. The sponsor of that bill, former Senator Ken Messerly, said it was a mistake. While this bill is often attached or is suggested to be an LNG pipelines bill, it's actually a major benefit is for local government water and sewer projects that are currently being held up, such as the Tualatin Lake Oswego project. And also the construction of electrical transmission lines that are sorely needed to bring new renewable power to load centers and add reliability to the grid. We're hearing a lot about that now in terms of shutdown of wind power in the Columbia Gorge because of the lack of transmission lines. Colleagues, this is a very misunderstood bill. It's a simple bill. It's the good public policy, and it deserves your support.
Recognize Senator Alan Bates, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to vote in opposition to this bill, and I'm sad to do that. This could have been a good bill with a very simple amendment which the proponents of the bill refused to place in the bill. You can say what you want, but this affects LNG. It's a bill that's needed for people in the upper part of the state. It's for municipalities and for others. It has some real value there, no argument. But a very simple amendment would have resolved these issues for us. It wouldn't have pitted the environmentalists against jobs. It wouldn't have pitted rural Oregonians against urban Oregonians. It would have been simple to fix this. I'm very disappointed that did not happen. For that reason, I'm voting no and urging others to vote no and force that amendment, get this bill fixed so we all vote yes on it, and send it back to the House. The House can concur on this change. There's people over there saying they won't blink. If you don't send it back the same way it came, we're going to vote no. I don't believe that to be true, and I would like to be held hostage by the House. So I'm asking a no vote from this chamber today. Let's force the amendment we all know we want in this and send it back over there and get this thing fixed. Thank you, Mr. President.
Recognize Senator Jeff Cruz, please.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. You know, a lot of the misinformation about this bill was just represented by my good friend, Doc Bates. This isn't an LNG bill. Quite honestly, LNG is a federal issue, and the siting of a pipeline is going to be a federal issue. The state of Oregon has very little impact into that. There's really no way to write LNG out of this other than to say no LNG. And quite honestly, that doesn't solve any problem because that FERC process is the federal level and we don't have an impact on it. So it's one of my frustrations, Mr. President. This is a good bill. This helps streamline process. It actually is going to help landowners know with a higher level of certainty on the front end what might or might not happen and what the conditions are going to be. An agency now could go to a landowner with assumptions of what the conditions are going to be, and then may have to come back once they find out the real conditions. Being able to do this on the front end makes total sense. To say that somehow this bill expedites an LNG pipeline is actually false because that's a federal issue, not a state issue.
Further discussion? Senator Byer, do you wish to close?
Very quickly, Mr. President. Colleagues, I've heard the concerns, and we've certainly all got a lot of mail in it. Most of it is woefully misinformed. People understandably are concerned, but as a practical fact, it won't affect them that way. What will affect is if this bill does not pass today, it's dead for the session. There are major water and sewer projects that are sorely needed in the Tualatin Lake Oswego project, our area, that won't go forward without this. They're needed. I spoke before about the electrical transmission lines, something I know very well. There are projects that are hung up now that won't go forward without this bill, just frankly because you can't get the process started under the current system. This bill was strongly supported by the staff at DSL that does the siting. It's strongly supported by the people at the Energy Siting Commission that have to deal with that issue. It is the right public policy. Politics aside, you should vote to support it. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question now arises upon a third reading, the final passage of House Bill 2700. Those opinion bills pass, say aye. Those opposed, no. Clerk, please call the roll.
George, Gerard, Haas, Johnson, Cruz, Monaz-Anderson, Monroe, Morse, Nelson, Olson, Przonski, Rosenbaum, Shields, Starr, Telfer, Thompson, Verger, Whitsett, Winters, Atkinson, Bates, Byer, Bonamici, Boquist, Burdick, Devlin, Dingfelder, Edwards, Ferrioli. President Courtney.
Yes.
Voting no, Atkinson, Bates, Bonamici, Dingfelder, Ferrioli, Gerard, Johnson, Przonski, Whitsett. 20 ayes.
House Bill 2700, having received a constitutional majority, is declared passed. Senator Farrelly, for what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President, for a vote explanation.
Please file your vote explanation.
Yes, briefly, Mr. President. The bill passed, and then, so therefore, we'll see linear facilities. But, Mr. President, I would just point out to people that folks who don't have any equity interest in a piece of property will now be able to make fill and removal applications on private property. And Mr. President, I just was wondering how folks would feel if we had passed a bill that would allow somebody to put a loan application in on a property that they had no interest in, or do some similar bureaucratic functions. Mr. President, there's a lot of trauma associated with the siting of linear facilities. We definitely need to have a better process. That better process was before us in the form of a bill that would allow proponents of a linear facility to come forward and make a proposal for a route, let the Division of State Lands opine on the proposal in a binding manner, and do all that without ever having made an application on somebody's property that they have no interest in. Mr. President, we chose not to do that. This bill goes forward. I will tell you, this is the beginning of a long, litigious, and miserable chapter in linear facility history. Thank you, Mr. President.
Recognize Senator Suzanne Bonamici, please.
Explanation.
Please file your vote explanation.
Thank you, Mr. President. I recognize that House Bill 2700 is a bill that may expedite some linear facility projects like railways, highways, roads, water or sewer lines, and communication and electrical transmission lines. And if the bill were limited to those uses, it would have received my support. But I've heard from many Oregonians who remain deeply concerned about liquefied natural gas and about the potential environmental and other impacts that LNG terminals and pipelines might have on forests, farmland, and watersheds. To address those concerns, I had an amendment drafted that would have exempted from this bill LNG projects for which a permit was sought after the effective date of that bill. Because that and other similar amendments were not adopted, I voted no. Thank you, Mr. President.
Recognize Senator Brian Boquist, please.
Vote explanation, Mr. President.
Please file your vote explanation.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a torn bill. This is a 51% good, 49% bad. It really goes back to, interesting enough in my district, to the people who opposed Measure 7, 37, and 49, then turn around and we have the issue of the LNG. The good news is LNG is not profitable to come across my district, so that's safe, and it is a federal process through FERC. But again, it's a bill where we're balancing public safety on one side versus landowner rights on the other side. Thank you, Mr. President.